Hi there, I'm George. In this video, I'll explain how George Orwell's Shooting an Elephant is connected to Timothy Findley's historical fiction novel The Wars, an anti-war poetry called Duelist et Decorum Est, and a short story called Man Descending, as well as literary series and literary devices applied to this literary text. Let's first introduce this nonfiction prose essay by George Orwell. It was written in 1936 based on Orwell's experience as a young British police officer in colonial Burma. In the essay, the narrator, who is a police officer, receives a report that an elephant in heat has escaped and it is displaying properties in a poor village. Villagers stop him along the way to describe its path of destruction, and it has even killed a man. After seeing the dead body, he follows the crowd to a rice field with his rifle, where the elephant is now calmed down and being peaceful. At this point, the police officer realizes that he should not kill the elephant, because it's no longer dangerous, and he knows the owner will suffer a major loss. However, when he turns around, he finds himself surrounded by a massive crowd, all expecting him to shoot. Afraid of being mocked or seen as weak, he feels their expectations pressing him forward, and consequently he has killed the elephant. This text explores how external forces cause people to act against their conscience, and how fear of looking weak can push someone to commit violence. It's both a political critique of the British imperialism and Orwell's personal reflection. This brings its connection to the novel The Wars by Findley. Even though the two texts have different historical settings, they are strongly connected through the exploration of elements like moral conflict, pressure, guilt, power, and the theme of how individuals navigate ethical choices under extreme circumstances. For example, Captain Leather refuses Robert's wish to save the horses and mules under bombardment. The pressure from the authority causes Robert to experience a psychological collapse, where he shoots Captain Leather in the head. It is an impulsive and morally rejecting act. Similarly, the police officer is forced by thousands of men behind him, and his immoral part of him overtakes the moral part, which results in the death of the elephant. Both characters are young men placed inside powerful systems, public expectation for the police officer and wartime hierarchy for Robert. In both cases, these systems force them to act against their conscience. The results are the same: guilt, emotional damage, and the distorted personal morality. Just like how it connects to the wars, Shooting an Elephant also connects to the poem Duelist et Decorum Est by Wilfred Owen in the same way. Both pieces reveal how public beliefs and cultural expectations twist the idea of moral action. In Owen's poem, soldiers are pushed forward by the patriotic belief that dying for one's country is honorable. They only discover that this ideal is a lie through brutal trench warfare. The narrator criticizes the Great Britain for promoting the patriotic ideology, as the quote states, "My friend, you would not tell with such high zest to children ardent for some desperate glory the old lie, Duelist et decorum est, pro patria mori." And this Latin phrase means, "It is sweet and honorable to die for one's country." The gas attack scene in the poem further shows how ordinary men are turned into victims by a system that glorifies sacrifice while ignoring its reality. This parallels the police officer in Shooting an Elephant. Descriptions of the elephant before its death are horrifying, just like the descriptions of soldiers in the front line. Therefore, we learn that performing the role others expect, whether as a soldier or a colonial officer, can lead to decisions that feel deeply wrong. Instead of focusing on obedience to authority, Owen highlights how ideology and propaganda shape people's choices, while Orwell shows how social judgment and fear of humiliation can be just as controlling. Together, both texts show how individuals become trapped by the society pressure and how this can lead to unnecessary suffering and regret. Along with its connections to the stories taking place in World War I, it is also parallel to Guy Vanderhaeg's short story titled Men Descending. The connection becomes clearest in the moment when the protagonist, Ed, fights Howard, a man who has an affair with his wife. Just like the police officer who shoots an elephant only because he is terrified of looking weak in front of the crowd, Ed falls into a fight he knows is pointless and self-destructive. In the story, he admits that what he's doing is very stupid. Yet he goes through with it anyways, because the pressure of the moment, jealousy and the embarrassment triggers the same fear of humiliation that drives the police officer. Ed doesn't want to fight, but he wants to protect his pride. The police officer also doesn't want to kill the elephant. He wants to avoid being laughed at. In both texts, the men lose control of their decisions and betray their own judgment because the performance of masculinity becomes more important than their moral instincts. Their actions show how social expectations push men into behaviors they know which are wrong, leaving them ashamed afterward. One is pushed by public expectation, the other by private pressures and internalized ideas of masculinity. But the result is the same in both. The man ends up acting against what they truly want, revealing how fragile and performative traditional masculinity can be. Other than the plot and the themes that connect both texts, the detailed portrayal of both protagonists' inner conflicts is best examined by the literary theory called psychoanalytic criticism. In Men Descending, Ed briefly reveals how unconscious impulses override reason when he describes himself and Howard as two willful men rotting stags in the stilly night. This is a moment showing instinct overwhelmed judgment. This idea becomes far more fully developed in Shooting an Elephant, where the police officer's internal struggle fills the entire story after he encounters the elephant. From the moment he sees the huge crowd, 2,000 at least, a sea of fellow faces, he feels his control slipping, admitting he should have to shoot the elephant, even though he knows with perfect certainty that I ought not to shoot him. His fear is not physical danger but humiliation. He feels that there are 2,000 wills pressing me forward irresistibly and realizes he is only an absurd puppet pushed to and fro by the will of the spectators. The psychological pressure to appear confident becomes stronger than his conscience, especially when he confesses that my whole life was one long struggle not to be laughed at. This fear dictates his action far more than logic, leading him to fire simply because he cannot bear the thought of public embarrassment. His final action, described by himself as solely to avoid looking a fool, reveals that his unconscious anxiety about pride and judgment is the real force driving him. In the last part of this video, let's explore various literary devices used in Shooting an Elephant that contribute to the unity of the text. Orwell relies heavily on imagery, which immerses readers in the narrator's psychological struggle. When the narrator fires several bullets, he observes how the elephant sagged flabbily to his knees. The imagery becomes even more graphic as the narrator watches the elephant's struggle, noting its long rattling gasps and the way its great mound of the side painfully rose and fell. This vivid sensory detail not only makes the scene emotionally overwhelming, but also externalizes the narrator's internal conflict. The elephant's suffering, described as dying very slowly and in great agony, deepens the story's unity by mirroring the narrator's psychological torment. Orwell also uses repetition to highlight the narrator's shrinking autonomy. The phrase, I did not want to shoot him, and the variations of I ought not to shoot him reoccur throughout the passage, emphasizing his moral resistance. This repetition contrasts sharply with the growing pressure of the crowd, reinforcing the central conflict: what he believes is right versus what he feels forced to do. The story features powerful symbolism, with the elephant representing more than an animal. When the narrator says the elephant looked immensely old, as though the frightful impact of the bullet had paralyzed him, the elephant becomes a symbol of helplessness and suffering, and also a symbol of the narrator's own loss of agency. Orwell also uses irony, especially when the narrator realizes that although he appears to be in charge, he is actually controlled by the crowd. I was only an absurd puppet pushed to and fro by the will of those yellow faces behind. The irony lies in a man with a rifle, seemingly powerful but without real choice. And that's it for this video. Hope you have a solid understanding of shooting an elephant.